Hi, this is Richard Miniter for Pajamas Media. I'm here in the Washington, D.C. hideaway of perhaps the world's most famous Danish journalist, Flemming Rose. He's the man who commissioned those 12 cartoons of Mohammed that for some reason stirred a little bit of unrest around the world.
فالحصار الأمني لمبنى القنصلية الدنماركية في بيروت لم يمنع المتظاهرين من اقتحامها وإضرام النار في مكاتبها التي تعود إلى شركات اقتصادية وتجارية ومدنية. تعرض المتظاهرون للمقدسات الدينية المسيحية لا سيما كنيستي مارن أولى ومارمارون وحتى لمطرانية الروم الأرثوذكس في الأشرفية.
But there's a lot more to the story than what you've heard, and today we're going to talk to Flemming about how his cartoons came to be, how the controversy was created and fueled largely by others, and then we're going to talk about his intellectual journey and why he commissioned these cartoons and what that personal intellectual journey means for his generation of journalists, and then finally we're going to talk about what this means for the future of Europe and perhaps for America. Flemming, thanks for joining us at Pajamas Media. But Flemming, perhaps the most interesting thing we could ask you right out front is, how did these cartoons come to be? I remember reading one account where it was a woman who wanted to illustrate a children's book, and that was something that you read about. Tell us about the genesis of these cartoons.
It was in fact a man. It was a children's writer in Copenhagen in September last year. This children's writer was writing a book about the life of the Prophet Muhammad.
In a very positive light.
Yes, well...
A factual light.
Yeah, factual light. And in fact, the book received very good reviews when it was published later on. It was a book, in fact, designed to reach children in Denmark.
In all across?
Yes.
Okay.
He went on the record saying that he had problems finding an illustrator for this book. You know, when you have a children's book about the life of Jesus, you want some pictures, and the same with Muhammad. But 3 illustrators, according to him, turned down his offer, referring to fear for the consequences. And the one who finally took up the job insisted on anonymity. And anonymity in my book is a form of self-censorship. You do not want to appear under your own name. And that illustrator later confirmed in 2 interviews that he was in fact scared, and he was specifically referring to the fate of Theo van Gogh, the Dutch filmmaker who was killed on the streets of Amsterdam in 2004.
That's right, shot and stabbed repeatedly.
Yes, exactly. And you know, that's why I commissioned the cartoons.
This is the page from the paper.
Yes.
People can get a sense of it.
What
were we trying to do? What were we trying to do with this?
Well, in fact, this was informed by my experience as a correspondent in the Soviet Union and a student of the Soviet Union. I spent a year in the Soviet Union, 1980-81, at the height of the Cold War, and I was cooperating for many years with dissidents. And in the behavior of these people in cultural life in Western Europe vis-à-vis Islam, I recognized some of the same patterns of behavior that I had seen in the Soviet Union. And I wanted to challenge cartoonists in Denmark, you know, along the lines that if one person is intimidated and does not want to make a cartoon, okay, but you know, if you have 500 people out there making a cartoon or making breaking this prohibition on the image of the Prophet, you will dilute the fear.
Yes.
So that was, in fact, my point of departure. This was about self-censorship, and it was about some Muslims trying to intimidate the public by enforcing their religious taboos, and not asking for respect but asking for submission. I mean, you can't force non-Muslims to submit themselves to Muslim taboos in the public domain. That's just, to me, that's incompatible with a modern secular democracy.
So you published these cartoons. You were trying to get a discussion going. You were mostly at this point interested in self-censorship. And then you learned it really was about something bigger. It was about a desire for censorship.
Yes.
So talk about your experience after this is published.
Because public opinion in the West was very divided on this issue, I think many, you know, radical Muslims sensed that there was a case, and that they should try to, you know, pressure it as hard as possible. And by the day, as the case went on, demands were increasing and increasing, ending up, you know, insisting that in every European Union document, it should be stated that it is forbidden to insult people's religious feelings, to making it a criminal offense, and thereby, you know, going against the last 200 years of European development.
We're going back to the Middle Ages and the blasphemy laws.
Yes, exactly.
Where to depict a saint in the 12th century France in unflattering light was a criminal act.
Yes, and some, you know, imams from the Middle East also insisted on having the right to decide what should be written in the textbooks in Denmark about Islam. I mean, which in fact is censorship, and
especially strange given that these imams almost certainly don't speak Danish.
Of course. But they, you know, they wanted to be offended, and they wanted to use this as a test case to see, you know, what kind of new limits might be drawn. In Damascus and Beirut, the Danish embassy was burned down.
Burned to the ground?
Yes. And it now turns out that, in fact, the thing that triggered these events were not the cartoons. That Saturday in Copenhagen, Muslims were sending SMS messages to their friends in the Middle East saying that the Quran was going to be burned in the central square of Copenhagen. Which also is not true.
I see. So it's that claim that really fired them up. Even though the world media said the buildings were being burned because of the cartoons. I
mean, the cartoons were the context, but in fact, I think the violent reactions were in fact triggered by this rumor, false rumor that the Quran was going to be burned in Copenhagen. If you look at the history of Europe over the last, you know, several hundred years, in fact, the increasing freedom, you know, has been a core due to the fact that we have been fighting the oppressive sides of religion. And I think in that sense I would also make a comparison with my experience in the Soviet Union, because in this totalitarian version of Islam you have this insistence on being in possession of truth, and you have this very clear image of enemies. You know, everybody who doesn't agree with you is an enemy and has to be, you know, either killed or converted, like the communists wanted to spread their faith around the world. And communism also, you know, invaded people's private lives. And the Islamists, they want to tell us, you know, what to eat, the way to dress, what music to listen to, what kind of drawings we should watch. So I think, although they don't have the Red Army or the Luftwaffe, you know, it is still a totalitarian ideology that appeals to a lot of people around the world. I think Europe is, you know, at a moment of truth right now, and we have to answer a question that we were not forced to answer for a long time. That is, who are we? What does it mean to be European? What is Europe about? That we have to lower the barriers for entrance and work out a more inclusive, politically defined concept of nationality.
So nationality has to become less about ethnic identity and more about an idea that is Danish.
Yes, exactly. And about citizenship. What does it take to be a citizen in a secular democracy?
Well, it means holding to certain values, I presume.
Exactly, of course. But we had to strip these values of their, you know, of their cultural.
Well, funny, what you're saying sounds very strange because it sounds so very American. I mean, this is.
I think we have a lot to learn from America you know, in trying to work out a concept of nationality that fits this age of immigration.
One of the key components of American assimilation, though, is people assimilate through work. If you hear people who defend even the presence of illegal immigrants, which we have a few of in this country, they'll say, well, they work hard. And virtually everyone on all sides of the debate will say, oh, yes, that's an important point. They'll acknowledge that. But of the 200,000 Muslims present in Denmark, which is a nation of only 5.1 million people, very few of them work. And they exist in public housing, what you call social housing, mostly living on public benefit. The few that do work are engaged in things that don't seem to take them anywhere, such as driving taxis. You know, they can be illiterate in both their own language and in Danish. How are these people going to assimilate if you don't radically shrink the welfare state and force them to work, and therefore force an obligation onto the rest of society to accept them?
I mean, you point your finger right to the center of the problem. we have to reform the welfare state. And it is true that in the United States, the labor market is the most effective mechanism of integration. And we have to work towards the same thing in Western Europe. If you let people work, and if you lower the barrier of the sense of belonging, I think integration will benefit. But on the other hand, you also have some people that do not want to integrate. And that's a problem on the left. You know, they have been pointing the finger on our society and saying, you know, it's because you are racist, it's because you're imperialist, these people can't integrate. But it's now turning, I mean, it's becoming clearer now that no, that might not be the case. It might also have something to do with the cultural and religious background of these people. The fact of the matter is now in Denmark we have almost zero unemployment. Mm-hmm. We have problems finding people to do work. Right. Although there are many immigrants that are not working, so we have to go to Sweden to bring in. I mean, it's a joke. You have a labor shortage, and you've got thousands and thousands of immigrants who refuse to work. Exactly. But this is not only Denmark's problem. No, this is a problem in Western Europe, and we have to face it. Yeah. One last question. Looking again at these cartoons, if you had to do it all over again, would you publish these cartoons? I don't regret that and I think this has been the most important debate in Denmark for decades, and it's been, you know, a common reference across Western Europe. Do you think by publishing them you protected free speech in Denmark? It remains to be seen. But in fact, I did not create a new reality, but I revealed a reality that was already now out there, and now we are able to discuss that reality in a more fact-based manner than we used to do, and I think that is a big achievement.